There is an object in Hallownest that looks almost too plain to contain a world. It is a black stone egg, smooth, heavy, and older than the kingdom around it. Nothing is written across its surface in the manner of a royal tablet. Its knowledge lies farther in, sealed beneath layer after layer, as though the people who made it believed that history should be protected by depth. Relic seeker Lem can work at one of these eggs for a very long time and still reach only the outer record. Somewhere beneath his tools are voices from an age before the City of Tears, before the White Palace, before anyone promised that Hallownest would last forever. Their names are gone, their faces are uncertain, yet the little egg remains, holding a civilization inside itself and refusing to open all at once. Tonight we're going to stay with those forgotten people. We will follow what they left in the abyss, trace their soul totems through the caverns above, listen to the two prayers that survived them, and separate the few things Hollow Knight confirms from the many beautiful, unsettling possibilities it leaves unanswered. There will be no need to solve every silence. This is a history built from fragments, and fragments can be held gently. If these slow walks through Hallownest help the day grow quieter, you can leave a like before you settle in, and perhaps say where in the world you are resting tonight. Then let the rain above the old city continue without us. Far beneath it, below the palace grounds and below the ancient basin, another age is waiting in the dark. The first important truth is that this civilization has no confirmed name. Ancient civilization is a description used because something has to be written on the empty label. No surviving character tells us what these bugs called themselves, what language they spoke aloud, or whether they thought of their settlements as one nation. There is no known monarch, council, capital, army, or founding legend. Even the word civilization may make their unity sound more certain than the evidence allows. What survives is a connected material culture. Arcane eggs, soul totems, a rare void idol, old structures near the abyss, and prayers addressed to the darkness itself. These remains suggest a people with shared knowledge and shared devotion. They do not reveal the borders of that sharing. That absence separates them from Hallownest immediately. The Pale King's kingdom pressed its identity onto everything. Roads carried royal signs, statues enlarged the king's crown, Hallownest seals marked authority, king's idols turned his image into treasure, and the capital was built beneath a promise of eternity. The older people left nothing so easily personal. Their greatest surviving idol does not depict a ruler. Their prayers do not praise a named god with a face. Their archives do not place public words on top of stone. What mattered most was hidden inward, while their worship descended toward something without a voice. Lem reaches their age through objects rather than chronicles. Wanderers' journals tell him about individual travelers. Hallownest seals lead toward royal offices and the 5 great knights. King's idols reveal how power wished to be seen. Arcane eggs do something stranger. The first one tells him that another civilization existed before Hallownest, despite the later kingdom's tendency to present itself as the beginning of meaningful history. Each egg offers only a narrow glimpse. It does not hand over a timeline. It opens a crack in Hallownest's claim to be first. This matters because kingdoms often begin their stories by simplifying what came before. Hallownest taught that the Pale King brought higher thought to the bugs within his reach. His light expanded minds, created law, and gathered scattered peoples beneath one order. Some of that may be true without making the land empty before him. The moths already had the Radiance. Green Path belonged to and the Moskin. Deep Nest had its spiders. The mantises preserved their own strength and custom. Beneath all of them, or perhaps moving among parts of the same ancient landscape, were the makers of the eggs and totems. The king's arrival was a transformation, not the creation of a world from nothing. The oldest civilization seems to have begun in or near the abyss. That is the safest reading of where its artifacts gather and where its surviving prayers remain. Yet its influence did not stay at the bottom. Soul Totems appear throughout Hallownest, far beyond the Black Sea. They stand in green caverns, old mounds, forgotten passages, fungal depths, and places later absorbed into royal territory. Their spread suggests movement across the land. The civilization may have expanded upward, shared its craft with separate communities, or watched later bugs carry the totems away from their original sites. The map confirms reach, but not the route by which that reach was achieved. To imagine the land before Hallownest, it helps to remove the roads first. There is no grand lift descending from the City of Tears, because there is no city. No tram crosses the ancient basin. No palace presses white roots into the bedrock. The caverns still contain lakes, fungal forests, crystal, moss, nests, and the low basin where darkness gathers, but the borders familiar to later travelers have not yet hardened. Ancient bugs move through a world shaped less by a single crown and more by older powers: dream, root, beast, weather, hunger, soul, and the darkness beneath everything. The civilization's deepest surviving statements are not instructions or laws, they are prayers. One asks the void to erase fear, eliminate desire, end suffering, and cleanse those who call to it. Another addresses a presence whose voice is silence and whose form is darkness. The speakers describe themselves as higher beings who can see it seeking and say that their shells yearn for its embrace. These are only a few lines, but they carry almost everything we know about the civilization's inner life. Fear, longing, and pain were familiar to them, and they believed purification might come when those burdens were gone. Their religion was unlike the devotions that followed. The Void Idol's record says they worshipped no lord, no power, and no strength, but darkness itself. That does not mean the Void lacked power. Its power is obvious to anyone who reaches the abyss. The phrase suggests that power was not the reason for worship, or at least not the reason later observers understood. The ancient bugs did not kneel before a ruler who promised protection. They turned toward the absence of rule, identity, feeling, and form. Where Hallownest would gather around a radiant king, the older faith seems to have yearned for release from the very self that could be ruled. It is tempting to call this a religion of death. The prayer asks to suffer no more, and the speakers offer their shells to an embrace that no shell can survive. Still, the game never states that they sought ordinary death, practiced sacrifice, or willingly drowned themselves in the sea. Cleansing may have meant transformation. Erasing desire may have promised peace while life continued. Their eggs show patience, craft, and concern for the future, which sit uneasily beside the idea of a people eager to vanish. They preserved knowledge with extraordinary care. Whatever they hoped the void would remove, they did not treat everything as meaningless. That tension makes them feel more real. A culture can desire release and still build archives. It can distrust the ego while preserving memory. It can believe that suffering comes from attachment without wanting every lesson erased. The arcane egg may even embody this compromise. Its outer form is closed and simple, almost empty, while its inner layers hold dense records. From a distance, it is silence. Within, it is crowded with meaning. The choice of an egg is important. Lem calls it a perfect protective form. An egg has no corner to crack easily, no exposed page, and no single surface on which all information can be scraped away. It is also a form associated with birth, potential, and the patient keeping of something not yet ready to emerge. Hallownest's records speak outward from flat stone. The ancient records wait inward. Their reader has to proceed carefully enough that discovery does not destroy the thing being discovered. Lem admits that he cannot reach the deeper layers. He can examine what lies nearest the surface, but going farther risks damage. This tells us the eggs were made for a method of reading that has been lost. They are more than hard stones with writing buried by accident. Their records were intentionally stored at different depths, and the makers presumably knew how to retrieve them. They may have separated each layer or revealed the etchings through soul, void, sound, or some technique with no later name. Hollow Knight never gives the procedure. The missing method is part of the history that the method was meant to protect. A fourth arcane egg leads Lem into a rare moment of uncertainty. Other relic seekers have claimed that the eggs possess a will, choosing one bearer and rejecting another. Lem remains skeptical. He knows scholars can confuse fable with fact, especially when an object resists ordinary explanation. Yet he also notices how many eggs the small wanderer has found. Maybe the knight has an explorer's instinct. Maybe the objects are drawn to a being made partly from the same darkness their creators revered. The story leaves both ideas in the room, without asking either to win. The eggs found during the knight's journey are concentrated around the abyss. One rests within the birthplace, close to the great black egg that preserves the knight's own memory. Another lies in the strange lifeblood chamber. Others wait in the depths and nearby basin. Their location supports the ancient civilization's connection to the lowest land, though later movement remains possible. Relics can travel, kingdoms steal, buildings collapse and carry older rooms downward. Archaeology in Hallownest is never as simple as finding an object and assuming it has never moved. The birthplace places two kinds of egg beside each other. The smaller arcane egg holds a record from the forgotten civilization. The enormous black egg reflects the night and opens into a memory of the vessel's creation. One was built to preserve knowledge, the other preserves trauma. Both require a special kind of access, and both reveal only what the visitor is prepared to reach. This parallel does not prove that the Pale King copied ancient archive design when he shaped later eggs, but it shows how the old form continued to gather meanings around itself. Hallownest's most famous egg is the Temple of the Black Egg, a sealed structure built to contain the Hollow Knight and the Radiance. Its architecture differs from the little relics sold to Lem, but the repeating form is hard to ignore. Eggs protect what is inside, whether the contents are knowledge, memory, infection, or a living prison. The old civilization placed history beneath layers. The Pale King placed a god and a child beneath seals. Protection and confinement become almost the same design. The Soul Totems tell another part of the story. They are carved statues that store soul, the force animating living bugs. When struck, they release bright energy that the knight can absorb for healing or spells. Lem identifies them as remnants of the same age as the arcane eggs. though he calls them larger and cruder. Their function is immediate in a way the eggs are not. A traveler does not need to understand the carving in order to draw life from it. Their faces vary. Some resemble rounded insects, others long-headed creatures, and some forms are hard to compare with any surviving species. It is uncertain whether they portray ancestors, deities, workers, symbolic bodies, or beings now extinct. Their differences could record the civilization's variety, or the styles of many communities using the same technology. The one thing they share is soul held in stone. That achievement is enormous. The later Soul Sanctum tears soul from living bugs, stores it in fragile glass caches, and ruins its scholars while seeking mastery. The ancient totems can rest for ages, release their energy, and fill again after the world pauses at a bench. The exact meaning of that renewal may belong partly to the language of the game, but the objects clearly outlasted their makers and remained useful. Hallownest inherited a stable technology without inheriting the understanding behind it. There is no confirmed account of how the totems were filled. They may have gathered ambient soul, received offerings, stored energy voluntarily placed within them, or used some practice no later culture remembered. It would be easy to assume that any reservoir of soul required victims because the sanctum used victims. That would make the later scholars' cruelty into evidence against people who never speak for themselves. The honest answer is smaller. The ancient civilization could store soul, and the cost of doing so is unknown. The totem's distribution makes them a buried infrastructure. Long after the civilization's disappearance, their reservoirs support travelers in nearly every part of the kingdom. The Pale King's roads and signs receive more attention because they still name their maker. The old totems keep giving without a name. They are wells from a forgotten public world, functioning beneath the monuments of the civilization that replaced it. Some appear in places of spiritual importance. The ancestral mound, home to a snail shaman, contains a large and distinctive totem. Others stand in dangerous passages where access to soul can mean survival. Their placement may once have followed routes that no longer exist. A traveler sees disconnected statues because later collapses, kingdoms, and territorial changes have broken the pattern. To their builders, the locations may have formed a coherent network of rest, ritual, communication, or travel. The snail shamans add another uncertainty. Their spells use soul, and their family has an ancient relationship with magical practice, but the game never identifies them as members of the void-worshipping civilization. Similar age is not shared identity. The shaman in the ancestral mound recognizes the knight's unusual capacity and later reacts with surprise when a spell becomes mixed with shadow. His kind knows soul deeply. The void-touched version lies outside what they expected. This distinction matters because the ancient landscape held more than one tradition. The makers of soul totems understood soul while worshipping void, two substances that behave almost like opposites. Soul animates bodies, sustains healing, and powers spells. Void is drawn voraciously towards soul and can consume what it reaches. A culture able to work with both may have understood the tension between life and emptiness more deeply than any later scholar. Their prayers suggest they did not mistake the void for harmless darkness. They saw it seeking. The word gives the substance intention without making that intention human. The sea below does not negotiate. Its tendrils form barbed shapes and strike at living intruders. It drives towards soul, It claims the worshippers addressed something hungry and still asked for its embrace. Perhaps they believed the hunger was honest. A king may promise eternity and fail. A god of light may ask to be remembered and punish forgetting. The void promises nothing in words. Its voice is silence, its form darkness, and its effect the loss of distinctions. To a person exhausted by fear and desire, that honesty might feel merciful. It asks for everything, because everything is what it takes. The void can exist as liquid, as tendrils, as a barrier, and as darkness given a body. This variety complicates any attempt to call it merely a substance. The sea in the abyss behaves differently under light. Shades carry memory and aggression. The collector moves with a will of its own. King's molds and wing molds hold void inside pale armor. The night can gather it under one will. In every form, void changes according to the container, pressure, or focus imposed upon it. The ancient civilization appears to have known at least part of this potential. A hidden figure near the shade cloak can be reached with the awakened dream nail. Before the night gains void heart, its thought speaks of void, power, and the absence of unity. After the transformation, it names the Night Lord of Shades. Whatever that figure is, its words connect power to unification. The old worshippers may have understood that darkness divided against itself was only hunger, while darkness brought into focus could act with purpose. The figure is often called the Shade Beast because of its internal file name, but the game offers no spoken title. It sits or lies behind a stone likeness, holding a bowl into which void gathers. The knight enters the bowl and receives the shade cloak, gaining the ability to pass through enemies and barriers as shadow. The scene resembles initiation, inheritance, and consumption at once. A later child of the Pale King accepts power from an ancient image whose people disappeared before the king arrived. The bowl is one of the civilization's most suggestive objects. A bowl gives dangerous liquid a boundary. It allows something formless to be held without pretending it has become safe. Similar vessel imagery appears throughout Hollow Knight. Shells hold minds, charms hold will, eggs hold records, masks hold life, and the Hollow Knight holds the Radiance. The ancient figure does not eliminate the void's nature. It creates a place where that nature can gather. The shade cloak changes the night physically. Ordinary movement leaves a pale trail, while the shadow dash briefly dissolves the body into blackness. Barriers made from void no longer prevent passage. The night does not command every form of darkness yet, but carries enough of it in an awakened state to move through what once refused entry. The old gift is not a weapon alone. It is recognition between like substances. On the western side of the abyss, another shrine transforms the Howling Wraith spell into Abyss Shriek. Stone faces crowd around an altar, mouths raised in a silent cry. When the knight releases the earlier spell there, void enters the scream and enlarges it. The snail shaman later hears the distortion and admits that no member of his family expected power from such a place. A spell born from soul returns from the abyss carrying shadow. The shrine's makers are not confirmed. Its location and function place it close to the ancient civilization's legacy, but proximity is not a signature. It may have been built by the void worshippers, altered by the Pale King, or shaped through a later event. The faces could portray worshippers, victims, vessels, or an abstract chorus. What the scene confirms is that the abyss can change inherited magic. The night brings a voice into the dark, and the dark sends it back as many voices at once. Deepnest preserves a more direct collision between soul totems and void. In a hidden region reached through a shade gate, old totems are wrapped in black tendrils. Nearby lies the sharp shadow charm, described as containing a forbidden spell that turns shadows into deadly weapons. Its shape resembles one of the totems. The ancient storage of soul has been invaded, altered, or overgrown by the substance that hungers for soul. Whether the civilization created Sharp Shadow is uncertain. The charm may be the result of void corrupting one of their works long after they vanished. Calling it forbidden implies that someone once set rules around this magic, but the description does not identify who. The charm could preserve a taboo from the old culture, from Hallownest, or from another group that encountered it. The ruin gives us a relationship, not a date. Soul, stone, and void met there, and the result learned how to wound. Even so, the area shows why the civilization cannot be understood as simple worshippers kneeling beside a black lake. They made durable machines. They encoded layered archives. They stored the animating force of living bodies. They shaped idols capable of holding void in distinct states. Their religion and practical knowledge were intertwined. Darkness was an object of devotion, but also something observed, contained, and perhaps engineered. The rarest surviving artifact makes that union of faith and knowledge visible. The void idol is not found in an ordinary ruin. Its record appears through the Hall of Gods after extraordinary trials, almost as though the object belongs less to excavation than revelation. In its first state, it contains a single drop of liquid from the abyss. In another, that darkness writhes. In its highest form, the idol's spires twist together, and the large amount of void within becomes perfectly still. These changing states offer a miniature study of the substance. A drop can be held. A greater, volatile amount strains against its boundary. Unified void becomes calm. Stillness does not mean weakness. The night's later unity proves the opposite. The most powerful darkness may be the darkness that has stopped thrashing in every direction. If the ancient makers designed the idol with this transformation in mind, then they knew their god had states, and that focus changed what it could become. The idol's form does not give the void a familiar face. Its spires rise around an interior space, guarding and framing what cannot be carved. Hallownest's idols turn the Pale King's body into an object of devotion. The ancient idol turns absence into the center of the object. Stone exists around the darkness, not in place of it. The hunter, looking at this faith from the outside, cannot decide whether its followers were inspired or mad. That judgment is useful because it preserves the discomfort. Worshipping darkness can sound profound when heard through a poem, but the actual void lashes at life, consumes soul, and destroys shells. Admiration should not smooth away the risk. The old bugs may have discovered a truth that later saved the kingdom. They may also have loved a force incapable of loving them back. No artifact tells us how ordinary life worked around that devotion. We do not know whether every bug worshipped the void, whether priests interpreted its silence, or whether skeptics lived beside the faithful. A civilization's official prayer rarely contains every private thought. Some may have approached the sea with longing. Others may have maintained totems because it was useful work. Children may have inherited customs they did not fully believe. The surviving sacred objects can make a whole people look more unified than any living society ever is. There is no evidence for a Void King. That absence is especially striking in a world full of higher beings who gather communities around themselves. The Radiance received worship from the moths. Undreamed the Moskin into being. The Pale King offered mind and order. The ancient civilization addressed the void without naming a personality within it. Their object of worship may not have commanded them. It may not even have noticed them in a way a bug would recognize. The prayer nevertheless says that the darkness is seeking. This could mean the worshippers saw intention in the void's hunger. It could mean they believed it sought them specifically, answering their yearning with its own. Or it may describe the literal movement of tendrils reaching towards soul. Religious language often grows where physical behavior and personal meaning overlap. A tendril rises from the sea. One observer calls it appetite, another calls it invitation. Their use of the word shells deserves care. In Hallownest, shell can mean the physical body, the mask-like boundary around a being, and sometimes the vulnerable form that contains something less visible. The worshippers say their shells yearn for the void's embrace. The line may describe bodily union, death, spiritual surrender, or the desire to let the boundary of the self dissolve. All those readings share one thought. Suffering is connected to separation, and darkness promises an end to separation. The request to erase fear and desire resembles a wish for perfect emptiness, which later becomes central to the Pale King's vessel plan. He seeks a being with no mind to think, no will to break, and no voice to cry suffering. The ancient prayer is not identical. Its speakers admit they have fear and desire, then ask to be cleansed of them. The vessels are supposed to begin without those things. One is a chosen transformation, the other is imposed design. That difference separates devotion from manufacture. Still, the parallel may have influenced the king. The abyss already contained a tradition describing the elimination of inner life as release. When he searched for a container immune to the Radiance's dreams, the old language of emptiness may have offered a path. The story never shows him reading the prayers, and no record states that he copied ancient doctrine. Yet he worked in their sacred depth, studied the same substance, and built children around qualities their tablets praised. At minimum, his solution grew in soil prepared by a much older idea. What happened to the people who first carried that idea is Hollow Knight's quietest large mystery. By the time Hallownest rises, they are absent. Their eggs have become coveted antiques. Their soul totems continue working without caretakers. Their prayers survive on stone, where no congregation remains. The game gives no scene of collapse, no named enemy, and no grave clearly labeled as theirs. A civilization that stored knowledge more securely than Hallownest somehow lost the living readers able to reach it. The most direct theory is that they received what they prayed for. They yearned for the void's embrace and asked it to cleanse fear, desire, and suffering. Perhaps a ritual unified them with the sea. Perhaps they entered willingly, allowing shell and self to dissolve into the darkness. In that reading, disappearance was not a military defeat. It was the completion of their religion. The theory is powerful because the prayer points towards surrender, but it goes beyond confirmed events. There is no mass procession carved on a wall. No surviving witness says the people entered the sea. The hostile, unfocused void encountered by the night does not behave like a peaceful community of merged minds. If the worshippers joined it, their identities are not clearly detectable. They may have achieved unity, or they may have been erased so completely that the distinction no longer matters. A darker version says the civilization misunderstood what it worshipped. They learned to hold drops, store soul, and recognize the power of unity, then believed knowledge granted safety. A failure of containment could have released darkness through their settlements. The force they called cleansing may have consumed them without ceremony. The scattered totems would remain because stone endured where shells did not. This resembles later Hallownest in an uncomfortable way. The soul sanctum believes it can master soul and becomes deformed by its own experiments. The Pale King believes he can control void through armor, light, and bloodline, then leaves the abyss full of dead children. The God-seekers believe they can tune to a supreme God and open their shared mind to something that overtakes them. Hollow Knight often punishes the belief that understanding a force is the same as owning it. The ancient civilization may be the first lost example, though the game never confirms the pattern began there. Another possibility is gradual decline. Civilizations do not always end in one luminous catastrophe. Roots fail, communities separate, languages change. Children stop learning the deepest layers of an archive. A religious center near the abyss can lose influence while its objects remain in distant villages. Over centuries, the people who made Arcane Eggs may have become other peoples, carrying fragments of practice into the tribes later found across the land. This possibility explains why there is no battlefield and no single ruin that feels like a destroyed capital. It also fits the diversity of later Hallownest. Ancient descendants could have joined moth, fungal, mantis, spider, shamanic, or other communities without preserving a separate name. Cultural disappearance is not always biological disappearance. A people can survive while losing the category by which historians would recognize them. There is no direct lineage to prove this. The snail shaman's command of soul makes them tempting candidates, as does their long presence in old mounds. But their surprise at void-touched magic argues against treating them as straightforward heirs to a void tradition. Shared tools can pass between groups. A soul totem in a shaman's home may be inherited infrastructure rather than family workmanship. The moths are another possible point of contact because the Radiance is described as the void's ancient enemy, yet their known devotion is to light and dream, almost the inverse of the old prayers. If conflict occurred between the followers of Radiance and Void, the story has removed every dependable detail: date, cause, scale, and outcome. The phrase ancient enemy confirms opposition between powers. It does not confirm an ancient war between their worshippers. That distinction prevents a neat but unsupported epic. It is easy to imagine armies of moths carrying dreamlight into the abyss, while void priests answer with black tendrils. The image fits the later battle with the Radiance so well that it can feel remembered even though it was never shown. The game offers only the relationship between light and void. A natural opposition may have existed before either civilization organized it into war. The void is able to consume the Radiance at the end of one path, while the Radiance recognizes it as an ancient enemy when confronted. This suggests an old history between powers that reaches beyond the Pale King. Perhaps the ancient civilization discovered that opposition and shaped its faith around it. Perhaps the Radiance had already harmed them. Perhaps their worship made them enemies of her moth tribe. Or perhaps light and darkness are enemies by nature, and every culture merely inherits that tension. There is also the possibility of displacement by the Pale King's expanding order. Hallownest absorbed many territories and offered its light as a gift. Those who accepted entered a kingdom of roads, law, and common identity. An older culture without a lord would sit uneasily beneath a ruler who presented himself as the source of mind. Its sacred places could be appropriated, sealed, or renamed. Its descendants might be folded into Hallownest until the old name disappeared. The timing makes direct conquest uncertain. The ancient civilization may have vanished long before the worm arrived. Lem describes it as something before Hallownest, not necessarily something Hallownest defeated. The abyss seems abandoned by the time the king turns it into a workshop and birthplace. There are no visible defenders resisting him. If royal expansion erased the old culture, it may have erased a remnant rather than a thriving civilization. Memory itself may be the simplest killer. Hallownest's moisture ruins parchment. Stone breaks. Languages become forgotten. Relic seekers work alone among husks, and Lem's colleagues are discussed but never seen in the ruined kingdom. The Arcane Eggs survive, but the key to their deeper text does not. Their creators may have believed that a perfect container was enough. It was not. Information also needs a living tradition of readers. This is one of the saddest lessons hidden in the eggs. The record is present and inaccessible. Nothing burned it. No tyrant scraped it away. The knowledge waits a few layers beneath Lem's reach, intact enough to matter and closed enough to be almost equivalent to loss. Preservation without interpretation can leave the past perfectly safe and perfectly silent. Later, Hallownest does not treat all ancient remains with respect. The Soul Sanctum appears to have gathered old totems into its research complex. A pile of them lies beneath the Soul Master's arena, near the bodies of bugs consumed by the scholar's search for a cure. The ancient objects become resources in a program their makers never approved. The Sanctum's scholars believed soul could stop the infection. Their records speak of breaking the limits of mind and attaining pure focus. They extracted soul from living bugs, leaving bodies below, and transformed themselves into mistakes, follies, twisters, and swollen masters. Around them stand the more stable reservoirs of an earlier age. The contrast is almost cruel. They possessed artifacts proving that soul could be stored safely for centuries, yet whatever understanding allowed that stability was gone. Perhaps they tried to reverse engineer the totems. Perhaps they simply drained them. The game does not show a scholar explaining the collection. The physical pile is enough to suggest appropriation. Hallownest's brightest researchers brought the old civilization's work into their tower, stripped it from context, and placed it beside experiments that consumed the living. The Pale King approached the abyss with greater knowledge and greater ambition. He found a sea of void below his kingdom and built a lighthouse on a natural spire beside it. The lighthouse uses concentrated lumifly light to suppress the tendrils. When the lamp shines, the sea becomes calm enough to cross. When it is dark, the void rises toward anything living. The architecture of the lighthouse belongs to Hallownest, not the ancient civilization. This is an important boundary. The old people worshipped the sea. The king installed a mechanism to control its surface. Their prayer asked for embrace. His machine demanded distance. Where they looked into darkness for cleansing, he lit the shore so workers could pass without being taken. Royal retainers operated the lighthouse. One dead retainer's lingering thought apologizes to the king and says the sea calls. The words suggest that even those assigned to suppress the void could feel its pull. Whether the retainer turned off the light, failed to maintain it, or merely died at the controls remains uncertain. By the night's arrival, darkness has reclaimed the shore. The light does not destroy void, it changes its behavior. Lumaflies gather, the beam spreads, and the tendrils flatten into still liquid. This tells us the king understood at least one practical weakness. It also shows the limits of that understanding. Control depends on a lamp continuing to burn. Once the keeper is gone, the older force resumes, as if Hallownest's command were only a brief interruption. Across the sea, the king's study overlooks the black water. Diagrams and an imprint of void tendrils record his investigation. The hunter's journal gains the description of an imprint of abyss given form. The phrasing treats tendrils as a shaped expression of something larger, a local body made by a deeper substance. The ancient worshippers seem to have known this intuitively. The king converts it into research. He carries void into the White Palace and places it inside constructs. King's molds wear thick white armor around fragile black bodies. Wing molds use pale shells to contain dark liquid interiors. These servants obey, guard, and fly. The king has taken what the ancient civilization treated as sacred and made it labor. The constructs demonstrate that void can be given purpose through a shell. Armor provides form, while royal design supplies behavior. Yet the word fragile in the king's mold's record reveals the arrangement's weakness. The white exterior looks strong, the darkness inside is vulnerable when exposed. Pale form does not become truly one with void, it surrounds and directs it. The collector may reveal what happens when such direction breaks. This strange black being resembles a king's mold's inner body, but moves without armor, collecting grubs and sealing creatures in glass jars. Its origin is never fully stated. It may be a royal construct escaped from its shell, an independent being of void, or something related but separate. Its laughter, possessiveness, and frantic movement prove that a void body can develop behavior far removed from perfect emptiness. The collector complicates the king's assumptions. If it came from royal molds, then removing the shell did not produce absence of will. It produced a peculiar will without restraint. The being desires, plans, hides maps, and protects its collection. Void can hold fixation as readily as obedience. The material chosen to create a mindless vessel repeatedly reveals forms of inner life. The king's workshop contains molds and tools that make his method feel industrial. He did not encounter one miraculous being and ask for help. He developed a process. Pale shells were shaped, filled, tested, and used. The ancient civilization's bowls and idols held darkness as the center of worship. The White Palace workshop turns the same darkness into a component. This does not mean the king learned nothing from the old civilization. His results are extraordinary. He creates guards able to function for ages and a containment plan capable of holding the Radiance for a long time. The moral failure lies less in ignorance than in purpose. Knowledge becomes valuable only when it serves the kingdom's survival, and anything touched by that knowledge can be reduced to material. The infection drives this logic toward its worst form. The Radiance attacks through dream, desire, and thought. A mind without thought appears ideal. A will without desire should not answer her call. A being without voice should not protest its burden. The king and white lady produce children and send them into the abyss so void can fill their shells. Countless vessels are born of God and darkness, then discarded when they do not fit the imagined purity. The ancient civilization's sacred depth becomes a nursery, testing ground, and grave. This may be the sharpest contrast between the two cultures. The earlier prayer speaks in first person: erase our fear, eliminate our desire, cleanse us. The worshippers ask transformation for themselves. The king applies emptiness to his children and calls the result necessary. At the bottom of the chasm, broken shells pile so thickly that the night climbs across siblings. Each one represents a life created for one function and judged unsuitable. Their shades remain, restless bodies of void with small horns and blank eyes. The ancient people disappeared and left tools. The Pale King's project leaves children. One vessel reaches the top. The Pale King looks back, and the young Hollow Knight looks toward him. That shared glance may contain the bond that later makes the chosen vessel imperfect. The king's method requires a thing with no attachment, but selection itself creates a relationship. He raises the Hollow Knight, trains them, and turns supposed emptiness into a beloved instrument. The plan fails partly because even the act of choosing can plant an idea. When the chosen vessel ascends, the king seals the abyss. A tablet outside declares that beyond lies only the refuse and regret of creation. The king's brand becomes the key. The phrasing reveals that he understands enough to feel regret, but regret becomes another reason to close the door. Darkness, dead children, ancient relics, and the evidence of his process are placed below royal access. The seal also cuts Hallownest off from the civilization beneath it. Whatever archives remain in the abyss are now locked behind the king's authority. The old history and the new crime disappear together. A visitor reaching the ancient basin can stand above the door without knowing either world exists below. Hallownest then builds its salvation around a different black egg. The Hollow Knight is chained inside the temple, the Radiance sealed within their mind, and three dreamers close the way. The kingdom's public memory centers on a fountain that praises the Hollow Knight's sacrifice. The countless siblings remain unnamed beneath the floor of history. Once again, one carefully shaped record stands above many unread layers. The Temple of the Black Egg carries an architectural resemblance to certain old forms and passages, though assigning every repeated curve to the ancient civilization would go too far. The king's kingdom often builds over what preceded it, adapting symbols as well as spaces. Whether he copied an archive, a shrine, or only the protective logic of an egg, he used an ancient shape to make containment appear sacred. For a time, the plan works. The infection recedes. Hallownest praises the vessel. The king promises eternity. Yet the Radiance survives inside a mind that was never truly empty. Orange light leaks through the chosen shell. The temple weakens, and the kingdom falls. The ancient civilization's void was strong enough to hold the enemy of light, but the king's attempt to command it through a single manufactured child could not remain perfect forever. By the time the night returns, almost no one speaks of the civilization below. Dirtmouth remembers the kingdom. The seer remembers the moths. The White Lady remembers the royal family. Lem studies relics in the rain. The old void worshippers survive mainly through objects that other bugs use without knowing their prayers. Their age is not the first mystery placed before the traveler. It waits behind many others, deeper in both ground and story. The route downward passes through the ancient basin, a name that gestures toward age without identifying whose age. The basin lies beneath the capital and near the vanished palace grounds. Ash, or pale dust, drifts across dark rock. Royal machines patrol empty passages. A tram once crossed the region, and a fountain holds the discarded shell of a broken vessel. Hallownest's remains occupy the foreground, while the civilization before Hallownest waits below a sealed gate. The word ancient can therefore mislead. Some structures in the basin belong to the Pale King's kingdom. The palace stood there, king's molds served there, vessels escaped or died there. The older civilization is not responsible for every weathered wall, simply because the area feels old. Hollow Night layers ruins vertically and historically. One fallen age sits on the foundations of another. Hornet becomes the guide toward the deeper layer. After testing the night at Kingdom's edge, she yields the king's brand. The mark is not a physical key in the ordinary sense. It is royal recognition carried in the body, granting access to a door made for the king's authority. The knight needs the identity of the civilization that sealed the abyss in order to enter the sacred place of the civilization that came before it. When the brand touches the gate, the enormous door opens with a weight that makes the descent feel irreversible. A royal seal gives way. Beyond it is a shaft filled with darkness, platforms, spikes, and the shells of siblings. The sound changes. Hallownest's music thins until the abyss seems to breathe through low air and distant movement. The first visit reveals the consequences of the vessel plan more clearly than the ancient civilization itself. Siblings rise from the dark and attack the night. They have no nails, voices, or bodies beyond horn shades. Their hostility may come from unfocused void, pain, the instinct to reclaim soul, or all of these together. They are family without recognition, created from the same parents and abandoned in the same place. They meet as threats because nothing unified them. That lack of unity echoes the thought within the Shade Beast. Void has power, but not while divided. Each sibling is a fragment shaped by one broken shell and one unfinished life. The sea lashes separately. The night's own shade attacks after death. Darkness without focus repeats loss rather than overcoming it. At the western altar, the night upgrades a spell. At the eastern shore, the lighthouse opens a path to the Shade Cloak. Between them lies the central chasm and the sealed birthplace. The abyss gives power before it gives memory. A traveler can leave with shadow movement and a stronger scream, while still knowing almost nothing about who built the oldest shrines or why the night was born there. This order mirrors the Pale King's relationship with the void. Use comes before understanding. The knight accepts abilities because the journey demands them. Only later, carrying both halves of the King Soul, can they open the hidden path and face the origin of their own body. The story permits power without self-knowledge, then quietly shows why self-knowledge changes the power's nature. The King Soul is made from two halves associated with the Pale King and White Lady. Its description calls it a holy charm symbolizing union between higher beings, and it produces limitless soul over time. One half waits with the rooted queen, the other lies at the end of the White Palace beside the king's body. Reuniting them creates a royal object whose deeper purpose is to open the way to a birthplace. This union of pale parents becomes the key to a place filled with dark children. The charm carries the promise of fertility, lineage, and royal divinity. But the door it opens reveals the cost of that union. Its endless soul leads back to the void that hollowed the offspring created through it. Light and darkness are not cleanly separate in the night's inheritance. The entrance appears only when the king soul is worn at the bottom of the abyss. The ground shakes and opens into a hidden descent. This place contains an arcane egg, tying the root physically to the older culture, but the central egg belongs to the knight's memory. It reflects the small figure approaching it. The image suggests that the sealed object recognizes the one whose past it holds. Dream nailing the reflection does not reveal the ancient civilization. It returns the knight to the moment of abandonment. The climb begins among countless vessels. The Pale King's words describe the chosen one through impossible requirements. No mind to think, no will to break, no voice to cry suffering. At the top, the young Hollow Knight follows the king away, while the knight falls back into darkness. The memory changes the king's soul into void heart, a charm symbolizing the union of two higher beings becomes an emptiness hidden within, now unconstrained. It no longer occupies notches and cannot be removed. The change is not an accessory upgrade. The knight accepts the past as part of the self, and the old royal identity gives way to a unity no parent designed. Confessor Gigi understands this transformation through the language of regret. Ordinarily, she calls back the knight's shade from the place of death. After Voidheart, she is struck by how completely the little wanderer has come to terms with what follows behind. The knight does not destroy the past or deny kinship with the siblings. They move through the place of origin and allow the hidden emptiness to become conscious relationship. The Voidheart's description says, "The void is unified under the bearer's will." This is one of the clearest statements of will in a being created to have none. The Pale King wanted emptiness because he feared a will could break. The knight becomes strong enough to challenge the Radiance by possessing will and bringing the void into alignment with it. The supposed flaw becomes the source of the successful answer. That answer resembles the ancient civilization's understanding while also departing from its prayer. The worshippers asked for their desire to be eliminated. The knight uses desire, or at least chosen purpose, to focus the darkness. They do not dissolve into void at the moment of revelation. They give it direction. The Lord of Shades is not cleansed of will. The Lord of Shades is the will around which fragments stop fighting. The effect is immediate throughout the abyss. Siblings no longer attack. Void tendrils become passive. The knight's own shade ceases its hostility. Nothing has been individually persuaded. A deeper recognition changes the relationship of all these forms at once. The darkness that once reached toward every source of soul now acknowledges a center. The stillness recalls the highest form of the void idol. Its spires are unified, and the darkness within rests perfectly calm. That artifact may be read as a model of what the knight later achieves, though no text says the ancient makers predicted this individual. The old civilization knew that unity mattered. The knight becomes the first known being, able to make that knowledge live across the abyss. The Shade Beast's thought changes as well. Before unity, it names power and lack. Afterward, it speaks the title Lord of Shades. The title may come from the ancient culture, from the nature of void itself, or from the creature's own recognition. Whatever its source, it sounds less like the Pale King's inherited authority, and more like a role the knight has become capable of occupying. Lord can be a misleading word here. The knight does not build a throne, issue commands, or ask for worship. The siblings' peace is expressed through the absence of attack. The title may describe focus rather than monarchy. Void needs one will in order to stop lashing without direction, but unity does not automatically reproduce Hallownest's hierarchy. This distinction protects the ending from becoming a simple replacement of one king by another. The night can become the center of darkness without founding a kingdom. The old civilization worshipped no lord, and yet its legacy culminates in a lord of shades. That apparent contradiction may mean the night is not an external master. They are void recognizing itself through one bearer. Bardoon senses the scale of the change. The ancient caterpillar-like being rests above kingdom's edge and speaks carefully about higher powers. After the knight receives Void Heart, Bardoon says the tiny creature has evolved beyond the worm. Such union in one being is a strength unseen before, perhaps capable of challenging nature itself. The Pale King used void as material. The night becomes a union with it that exceeds royal design. The White Lady also notices, though she cannot read ordinary emotion from the pulsing emptiness. She asks whether it feels triumph or hate, and admits she cannot sense either. Then she places Hallownest's future in the knight's hands. Her uncertainty matters. Unity does not make the night legible to a higher being of root and pale light. The transformed child belongs to a form of life the parents never understood. Steel Soul Jin calls the night more complete and compares the difference to distant masters. Jin's origins and masters remain mysterious, so the dialogue opens more questions than it closes. Still, another unusual being recognizes completion where the Pale King expected useful absence. The night's darkness is not a hole where identity should be. It is an identity formed through accepting the whole. Hornet responds in practical terms. She recognizes that the night accepted the void within and now possesses the strength to choose an ending. She asks whether the little ghost will replace the birth-cursed sibling or transcend that role. The choice is no longer between success and failure within the king's plan. The knight can step outside the plan's structure. The black egg was built to sustain vessel bodies. Its bindings drain Hornet, who is born of pale heritage and spider life rather than void. She can assist at the threshold and hold the Hollow Knight down for a moment, but the deeper battle belongs to siblings and ancient enemies. The chamber becomes the meeting point of the king's prison, the Radiance's dream, and the civilization's darkness. Without the Void Heart, defeating the Hollow Knight repeats the logic of replacement. The Knight absorbs the infection and becomes the next sealed vessel. One sibling takes the chains of another. The kingdom receives another period of containment, and the ancient power remains divided. The tragedy is rearranged rather than ended. With the void unified, a different path opens. Hornet pins the Hollow Knight. The dream nail reaches into the prisoner's mind, and the knight confronts the Radiance directly. The fight occurs in Dream, the realm of the old light. At first, the knight climbs through brightness alone. Then the abyss appears beneath the battle. Siblings rise as the Radiance is weakened. Void tendrils seize her. The shade of the Hollow Knight tears open the face of the god it carried for so long, and the knight breaks the shell that once defined its small shape. In shade form, the knight strikes until the Radiance is pulled down and consumed. The ancient enemy of void meets not one empty container, but the gathered force of the children sacrificed to contain her. This is often called the true ending in casual discussion, though the game presents several valid endings and does not use that simple hierarchy for all of them. Dream no more is the important name. The Radiance ruled through memory and dream. Void ends her by drawing the struggle beneath those forms into a darkness where her light cannot remain separate. Afterward, the temple of the black egg breaks. Hornet wakes among shell fragments. Below, the siblings sink peacefully into the ground. The image does not show the ancient worshippers, and it does not confirm that every form of void has vanished. It shows a specific family, released from the purpose imposed on it. In one reading, the ancient prayer has finally been answered through the vessels. Fear and desire end, suffering stops. Shells return to darkness, yet the route to this peace depended on the night first recovering memory and exercising will. Cleansing did not come through forgetting the self, it came through knowing the truth that the Pale King buried. That reversal gives the ancient civilization's theology a new meaning. Emptiness by itself is vulnerable to whatever tries to fill it. The hollow night was meant to be blank, and the Radiance occupied the hidden bond within. The night becomes effective by integrating memory, regret, and will with void. Peace is not the absence of history. It is history no longer divided against itself. Godhome carries this possibility farther. The God-Seekers use ritual combat to attune themselves to powerful beings. Their shared dream is a place of golden towers, pantheons, and statues that intensify gods through focused worship. At first they dismiss the night as too small to matter. As the ascent continues, their attention changes the scale of what they perceive. The Hall of Gods contains the Void Idol, linking the oldest worship in the land to the newest and most concentrated form of divine attention. The God-Seekers adore named strength. They seek a god of gods. The ancient civilization adored darkness without lord or face. Both traditions meet around the night. The idol changes as increasingly demanding forms of each battle are completed. With every challenge overcome, the artifact holds more active and then more unified void. This progression may be symbolic rather than a literal ancient mechanism responding in a museum. Godhome shapes meaning through attunement. Still, the final object confirms the association between unity, stillness, and immense power. Entry to the pantheon of Hallownest requires Void Heart. Skill alone is insufficient. The final ascent demands the transformed relationship to the abyss, because absolute radiance cannot be fully confronted by a vessel still divided from its own nature. The God-Seekers unknowingly place the ancient enemy and the unified void on the same summit. After the pure vessel falls in the fourth pantheon, a scene shows vessels gathered beneath the Radiance's light before darkness rises. A vast roar answers hers. The image feels less like one knight challenging a god, and more like an entire discarded lineage becoming aware of the enemy above it. At the peak of the last pantheon, the knight defeats absolute radiance in her strongest dream form. The small shell falls into a rising mass of void. Then something far larger emerges, a many-limbed darkness, sometimes called void-given focus. It tears the radiance apart until she bursts into essence. The God-Seeker recognizes this being as the new center of worship, the god of gods she had sought. The ancient civilization worshipped darkness without asking for a lord. The God-Seekers focus so intensely on divine hierarchy that the darkness takes a form suited to their expectation. Perhaps the night becomes a god there. Perhaps Godhome allows the God-seeker to perceive the full shape of unity already present. The exact metaphysics remain open. What follows is not gentle. Void floods Godhome and wraps tendrils around the God-seeker. In the physical junk pit, darkness leaks from her body and bursts outward. The unity that defeated the Radiance does not automatically become safe for every bystander. The ancient prayer's embrace can still look like consumption from the outside. This ending keeps the void morally difficult. It is not evil in the manner of a plotting villain, but neither is it a soft reward for completing the story. Focus gives it purpose, and the purpose visible in Godhome includes overtaking the dream that magnified it. The motives of void given focus are unknown. A god born from discarded children may not share Hallownest's idea of mercy. The delicate flower changes the outcome. If the God-seeker holds one when void erupts through her, pale petals react. A flash removes both the reaching tendrils and the God-seeker, leaving the flower with a small part consumed. The object is fragile enough to break from one careless strike, yet it can resist a higher form of unified void. The White Lady calls such a flower a first light, and says it is the only means the royal family possessed to resist the void with which they were forever linked. It comes from lands beyond Hallownest. This is not the Radiance's burning dreamlight, or the Pale King's imperial glow. It is quiet, living light held in delicate petals. The strongest answer to darkness may be something that cannot dominate anything. For the ancient civilization, the flower raises an unanswered question. Did they know such resistance existed? Did they reject it because they wanted the embrace? Did their disappearance occur before these flowers reached the land? No relic places petal and void together in their age. The contrast belongs to later history, but it clarifies the choice within the old prayer. Cleansing by darkness was never the only imaginable peace. It was the peace they asked for. The lifeblood chamber in the abyss offers another kind of blue resistance. A sealed door opens only before a traveler carrying enough lifeblood vitality. Inside is a dreamlike chamber filled with blue growth and watched by a vast multi-eyed creature. An arcane egg rests there, tying the room to the ancient age, but the relationship among lifeblood, the creature, and the old civilization remains unknown. This room should resist neat explanation. The arcane egg may have been placed by the civilization. The chamber may have formed around it later. The great creature may be a god, guardian, dream image, or something without a role in the surviving story. Its silence does not automatically make it another face of void. Blue life and black emptiness share the same depth without becoming the same force. The chamber demonstrates how much the abyss still withholds. What the night explores is a shore, not necessarily the whole extent of the dark beneath the world. Caverns may continue below and beyond the visible sea. Ancient settlements may lie in unreachable depth. The 4 eggs collected in Hallownest are not a complete library. They are the few pieces the ruins allowed upward. This scale helps explain why the civilization's absence feels so large. The visible evidence may represent only an outer province or sacred frontier. Calling the abyss their capital would be invention. It could have been their origin, temple, laboratory, burial place, or boundary with something they revered from a distance. Their ordinary homes may have stood elsewhere and vanished under later kingdoms. Soul totems across the land support that broader possibility. If the culture lived only beside the Black Sea, then many objects traveled far. If it lived throughout the caverns, then Hallownest was built among its former communities. Either way, the ancient civilization was not a tiny sect represented by one prayer. Its work became part of the land's practical fabric. Later bugs rarely notice this. A traveler strikes a totem, gathers soul, and continues. The act is so natural that the maker disappears behind the function. This is how infrastructure becomes invisible. A road is remembered as part of the landscape once nobody recalls the hands that cut it. A well becomes simply where water is. The civilization survives each time soul rises from stone, but it is not thanked by name. The night is uniquely suited to uncover this forgotten layer because silence does not make them turn away. Lem talks while the wanderer listens. Tablets speak into a mind that offers no reply. The abyss recognizes a body carrying void. The story's quiet protagonist becomes an ideal reader for a civilization whose voice was hidden in silence. There is also a melancholy resemblance between the night and an arcane egg. Both look simple from outside. Both contain layered history. Both resist ordinary reading. The night's shell hides royal birth, abandonment, travel beyond Hallownest, and a will the Pale King denied. Dream, memory, and encounter reveal those layers slowly. The small body is an archive no relic seeker could safely open. The comparison remains metaphor, not a secret canonical identity. The night is not described as an arcane egg. Still, Hollow Knight uses forms carefully, and the old archive teaches us how to look at apparent emptiness. A closed surface can protect complexity. Silence can carry records deeper than speech. That lesson is useful when trying to imagine the civilization beyond its sacred remains. Their surviving objects favor containment. Eggs enclose text. Totems enclose soul. An idol encloses a drop of void. Bowls give darkness a boundary. None of these containers permanently dominates what it holds. The egg may be unreadable. The totem empties and fills. The idol changes state, and the bowl transforms the one who enters it. Their craft seems less interested in freezing power than in keeping a relationship with it. Hallownest's containers are often more coercive. The black egg imprisons the Hollow Knight. White armor forces shape onto king's molds. Glass jars in the sanctum store harvested soul and shatter after use. The collector's jars hold creatures against their will. The comparison is not perfect because we do not know the ethics of ancient construction, yet the different afterlives of the objects are revealing. Ancient containers continue giving. Hallownest's containers tend to crack. The older people may have seen matter as layered rather than divided. Soul and void could occupy one religious world despite their opposition. A shell could be both body and boundary. Knowledge could be hidden in stone rather than separated onto a page. Their prayer did not ask a distant god to descend from elsewhere. It addressed darkness already beneath their feet and perhaps already within their understanding of life. This makes their idea of purity different from the king's. Royal purity requires subtraction measured against a task. Remove mind, will, and voice so a child can contain light. Ancient cleansing sounds more like relief from the forces that produce suffering. Both ideas can become frightening, but their direction differs. The king empties another being for use. The worshipper asks emptiness to take the worshipper. The word higher in the surviving prayer adds a puzzle. The speakers say, "We higher who see you seeking." They may call themselves higher because they possess awareness unavailable to ordinary creatures. They may be addressing the void from land above the sea. they may belong to a spiritual rank. Translation may also flatten a phrase whose original nuance is gone. The line does not prove that every worshipper was a higher being, like the Pale King or Radiance. Hollow Knight uses higher being for entities with exceptional power and perception, but ordinary bugs can write tablets directed towards such beings. The ancient speakers could have considered themselves elevated through knowledge rather than divinity. Their civilization understood arcane eggs, soul reservoirs, and the states of void. Such understanding may have felt like ascent, even while their worship moved downward. No confirmed image shows their clothing or faces. The figures carved into soul totems might portray them, but might just as easily portray revered creatures. The Shade Beast Shrine offers another possible body, though its identity is uncertain. A historian cannot safely choose one statue and declare it the typical citizen. Their visual absence keeps the civilization from becoming a costume design attached to a few lines. We know equally little about their scale. Large carvings imply organized labor, but not an empire. Arcane eggs imply specialists, but not a formal school. Totems spread across the land imply roots and cooperation, but not centralized government. A village network can share sophisticated ritual craft. A loose religious culture can leave common objects without answering to one capital. The lack of coins is notable, but not decisive. Geo survives from Hallownest and moves through nearly every later exchange, yet no object is identified as ancient currency. Perhaps the civilization used perishable goods, direct exchange, ritual distribution, or a form nobody recognizes. Perhaps Geo existed earlier and Hallownest inherited it. No text settles the matter. Economic silence should remain silence rather than becoming a claim that the old people lived without trade. The same restraint applies to warfare. Sharp shadow proves that void can be turned into a weapon, but it does not reveal an army. The civilization's prayer contains no conquest. Their idols do not celebrate warriors. That could mean they valued peace, or simply that war records are locked in deeper egg layers. A culture represented only by temples and archives will appear more contemplative than the full society may have been. There is one ancient nailsmith hidden in Kingdom's Edge, whose corpse rests beside an anvil. The internal name identifies the figure as ancient, and imperfect discarded nails nearby, fused into the quick-slash charm. It is tempting to make this smith a master craftsperson of the Void civilization. The evidence does not establish that link. Ancient can describe great age without specifying culture. The architecture nearby resembles forms seen around some soul totems and the black egg, but resemblance alone is not lineage. Keeping the smith at the edge of the story is more honest and more interesting. The ancient land contained skilled people whose relationship to the void worshippers is unknown. They may have belonged to the same world, traded with it, preceded it, or lived much later before Hallownest's final decline. The past was not one color simply because distance has dimmed it. The quick-slash charm born from the smith's failed nails offers a small counterpoint to the arcane eggs. The eggs preserve intended knowledge through careful construction. The charm preserves failure by accident. Discarded metal lies together long enough to gain a new power. History survives through design and through neglect, and sometimes the neglected object is easier to use. Shadow creepers in the abyss present a similar uncertainty. These black insects crawl along walls and floors, apparently natural to the lower environment. They resemble darkness without sharing the grand identity of the Lord of Shades. Nothing identifies them as transformed citizens. Treating every black creature as a dead worshipper would make the abyss simpler than it is. Some life may merely have evolved beside the sea. The siblings are different because their origin is shown. Their horns echo royal parentage, their shells lie below, and their shades emerge from the vessel project. This clear evidence helps define where ancient lore stops and Hallownest's crime begins. The old civilization did not create the siblings, its sacred substance was used to create them. Nor did the ancient civilization necessarily build the lighthouse, White Palace workshop, or royal door. Those structures carry Hallownest's marks and purposes. Confusing them with older remains would credit the worshippers with the system that suppressed their god and hid the king's children. The abyss is a shared archaeological site where later power has written over earlier devotion. The king's brand door may be thought of as the latest lid on an ancient archive. It does not only trap void, it controls access to every relic and prayer beneath it. Whoever owns the gate can decide what the kingdom remembers about the depth. Hallownest's citizens know the Hollow Knight as savior and the abyss as almost nothing. Authority over space becomes authority over history. Lem works against that forgetting in a modest way. He is not a hero with a nail or a dream weapon. He cleans objects, compares scripts, argues with absent colleagues, and pays Geo for things others might discard. His shop is cramped and guarded by irritation, but it preserves histories that royal monuments leave out. The ancient civilization survives in the story because one stubborn scholar takes a black egg seriously. His skepticism is part of the care. When fellow relic seekers say eggs choose their bearers, Lem does not accept the romance simply because it sounds old. He separates what the object proves from what scholars want it to mean. That habit is a model for reading Hollow Knight itself. Wonder grows stronger when uncertainty is named rather than hidden. Selling the eggs to him can feel strange. The knight gives away priceless records for Geo, and the items vanish into a private collection. Yet Lem is one of the few beings still capable of accessing even the outer layer. An egg kept in a silent inventory reveals nothing. In his hands, it rejoins conversation, however incomplete. There is a gentle irony in the exchange. The ancient civilization built a record to outlast kingdoms. Ages later, the record enters a shop beneath a leaking roof, purchased by a scholar whose city is already dead. Eternity does not look like an unbroken institution. It looks like one interested person finding one intact object before the rain reaches it. The egg's monetary value is high because rarity and knowledge overlap. Lem pays far more for them than for common journals. The price does not measure historical worth in any objective way, but it shows how later culture ranks surviving evidence. Royal seals are numerous. King's idols are prestigious. Arcane eggs are almost miraculous because they come from beyond the beginning of the known kingdom. Most citizens never reach that conclusion. The husks in the city continue old routines without thought. Mining bugs strike crystal. Moskin guard paths. Mantises defend their village. The ancient civilization's memory belongs to a small number of seekers and to the traveler carrying relics. A past can underlie an entire kingdom while remaining socially invisible. The City of Tears itself demonstrates how easily one age covers another. Rain falls from the blue lake through caverns over royal towers. Statues, signs, and elevators organize attention around Hallownest. Beneath those streets, older soul totems have already been removed, studied, or forgotten. The city appears complete because its architecture controls the view. The missing foundation does not announce itself. Ancient basin loosens that control. The farther down the traveler goes, the less royal grandeur can hide. The palace has vanished. Retainers are dead. The tram is silent. At the bottom, the king's regret sits on top of another civilization's darkness. Depth becomes a kind of honesty, though it is never a simple moral ladder. The abyss contains truth and danger together. This is why the ancient civilization should not be romanticized as the good kingdom before the bad one. Its members worshipped a force that destroys shells and pursues soul. They may have found peace, caused catastrophe, or imposed doctrine on people whose voices did not survive. Their namelessness makes idealization easy. With no ruler to condemn and no victim to quote, they can become whatever a later imagination needs. The objects resist that fantasy by remaining specific. A totem stores soul. An egg has layered etchings. A tablet asks for cleansing. An idol holds void. These are enough to suggest brilliance and longing. They are not enough to certify justice. Their legacy can be read through 3 later responses to void. The Pale King tries control. The ancient worshippers appear to seek surrender. The Knight achieves integration. Control produces servants, vessels, and a sealed grave. Surrender remains mysterious because the worshippers disappear. Integration brings unity powerful enough to end the Radiance, but may also unleash a new god through the God-Seeker. None of the 3 responses is entirely safe. The flower's intervention reminds us that even unified darkness can need a boundary. Hollow Night does not replace light worship with darkness worship and call the world healed. Radiance, Pale King, and Void all become dangerous when treated as total answers. The old prayer's wish to eliminate desire may be especially revealing here. Desire causes suffering, but it also drives rescue. Hornet desires an end chosen freely. The Knight returns to Hallownest and continues through impossible depth. The Grey Mourner's love carries a flower across hostile land. Lem's curiosity recovers forgotten history. A world without desire may be peaceful, but it may also lack the movement by which one being reaches another. Fear has a similar double edge. The civilization asks for fear to be erased, while fear warns a traveler away from the Black Sea. The Pale King's refusal to face fear contributes to secrecy. Courage in Hollow Night is rarely the total absence of fear. It is movement taken while the danger remains visible. Suffering is the hardest line. Asking to suffer no more needs no criticism from a comfortable distance. The ancient bugs may have endured conditions the surviving text never describes. Their world may have faced the Radiance, environmental collapse, war, sickness, or the ordinary pain of mortal shells. The Void's silence may have appealed because every named power demanded something from them. The lack of a lord could have been liberation. If no king owns thought and no god demands remembrance, darkness offers equality through the removal of hierarchy. Every shell reaches the same end, yet equality through erasure carries its own violence. Difference disappears because everyone disappears with it. The Knight's unity suggests another form of equality. Siblings do not become identical through destruction. Their separate shades gather around a shared will and act together against the source of their suffering. Afterward they rest. The scene does not show one sibling enthroned over the others. Focus allows collective action, then releases it. Perhaps this is the answer the ancient civilization approached, but could not achieve. Its artifacts know that unified void is still. Its prayer knows that separation hurts. What it lacks, at least in the surviving record, is a bearer able to unite darkness without being consumed by it. The night arrives ages later as a child of the power that replaced them, carrying royal shell and ancient emptiness in one body. That interpretation remains a reading, not a hidden line of prophecy. No tablet predicts the night. No egg opens to reveal their horns. The civilization may never have imagined a Lord of Shades. Hollow Night lets history create possibilities that the people within history did not intend. Ancient knowledge becomes part of a future its makers could not control. The void heart itself has no charm cost because it is no longer an object being worn. It becomes part of the bearer. This mechanical detail supports the story of integration. Strength, soul catcher, and other charms can be removed. The accepted past cannot. Once the night remembers the birthplace, there is no return to the earlier innocence of being merely a wanderer. The old civilization's records work in a related way. Once Lem establishes that Hallownest was not first, every royal monument changes slightly. The king may still be powerful, but he is no longer the beginning. The city may still be beautiful, but it is built in occupied time. Knowledge does not alter the stone. It alters what the stone can honestly claim. Even the title Ancient Civilization can then be heard as provisional. It defines the people by their distance from Hallownest, the later culture used as the center of the calendar. They were not ancient to themselves. Their totems were new once. Someone finished an arcane egg and worried whether the inner etching was correct. Someone approached the sea before any prayer had become traditional. There may have been ordinary mornings near the abyss. Workers checked a totem. A craftsperson polished stone. A student learned how to read the first layer of an egg. Someone doubted the silence was listening. Someone else found comfort in it. None of these scenes is recorded, so they cannot be narrated as fact. But remembering the possibility of ordinary life prevents the civilization from becoming only a theological diagram. The people who asked to lose fear first had to know fear intimately. The people who asked to lose desire had things they wanted. The people who ask for suffering to end had lives in which suffering mattered. Their prayer survives because it is not spoken by emptiness. It is spoken by selves longing to be free of self. Their final days, however they came, may not have felt final. A decline lasting generations rarely announces the last morning of a culture. The final reader capable of opening a deep egg may have died without knowing the skill would never be taught again. The final ritual at a void shrine may have looked routine. The last totem maker may have expected another apprentice next season. This quiet disappearance fits Hallownest better than a grand explosion, though it does not prove one. The kingdom is full of endings understood only afterward. The last stag keeps waiting for stations that will not reopen. The nailsmith seeks one final blade without knowing what follows its completion. Quirrell reaches the lake after a life partly removed from memory. Civilizations, like people, often cross their ending before anyone can name it. Farloom adds one more piece to this ancient history. Far from Hallownest, another black stone egg is found in an abyss beneath a different kingdom. Its description says it formed before the birth of Farloom. Fine etchings remain inside, and a relic seeker can decipher part of the old record. The words repeat the prayer of silence, darkness, seeking, and shells yearning for embrace. This discovery widens the civilization's shadow dramatically. The Arcane Egg tradition was not confined to the caverns later ruled by the Pale King, or else one of its relics traveled an extraordinary distance before Farloom existed. The same religious language appears beneath both kingdoms. Either possibility makes the ancient world larger than Hallownest's history suggested. The safest conclusion is not that one empire ruled every abyss. The evidence confirms shared antiquity and shared text, but the roots remain unknown. There may be connected depths beneath distant lands. Ancient travelers may have carried eggs between them. Separate communities may have belonged to one broad tradition. A single civilization may have reached farther than any later kingdom remembered. The map is open. Farloom's relic seeker can recover a small part of the writing, giving the ancient people a voice beyond Lem's outer layer summaries. The repeated prayer confirms that the surviving tablets in Hallownest were not isolated words invented by one lonely devotee. Their language traveled with the eggs or emerged from the same culture elsewhere. The discovery also makes the name Hallownest feel smaller. The void was never merely a royal secret beneath one fallen kingdom. It lies below other lands, touches other systems of power, and carries records older than their founding stories. The Pale King's great experiment becomes one local use of a force extending far beyond his foresight. Later events in Farloom show Void interacting with Silk, Soul, Old Weaver research, and another higher being. Those events belong to a different story and need not be unfolded fully here. Their relevance to the ancient civilization is simple. The darkness beneath Hallownest was not alone, and the old worshippers may have understood a world of depths that later surface kingdoms forgot. The ancient prayer itself gains a different sound when heard in two lands. In Hallownest, it seems like the last trace of one vanished congregation. In Farloom, it resembles a refrain. Silence is the voice, darkness is the form. Shells in more than one kingdom have looked downward and recognized the same seeking presence. This does not resolve the disappearance. If anything, it enlarges it. A culture broad enough to leave records beneath distant kingdoms vanished so thoroughly that both later societies rose without preserving its name. Their archive technology crossed ages, yet their identity did not. The eggs succeeded as objects and failed as introductions. Perhaps that was acceptable to their makers. A people asking for selfhood to dissolve may not have wanted a ruler's name carved over every door. They may have designed records to preserve understanding rather than fame. Lem wants to know who they were. The eggs may care more that the thought survives than that a signature does. There is humility in that possibility, though it may be our own projection. Hallownest's relics constantly advertise rank, journal, seal, idol. The ancient relic is simply an egg. It does not tell the finder whom to praise before opening it. Knowledge is nested without a visible throne. The contrast reaches all the way to the endings. The Pale King's statue stands in the capital, weathered but recognizable. The ancient civilization's decisive artifact appears as a small icon in a dream hall, its maker unknown. Yet the king's eternity fails, while the old insight about unified void shapes the power that defeats the Radiance. Fame and influence move along different paths. If every deep layer of every arcane egg could be read, the story might become less mysterious. There could be names, maps, debates, methods for filling totems, warnings about the sea, and an account of the end. It is possible the answers are all physically present. Hollow Knight leaves them sealed, honoring the distance between possessing a relic and understanding a people. That distance protects the civilization from one final form of conquest. Hallownest mined its soul totems, occupied its sacred depth, and used its void. The story does not let later characters own the last word about what any of it meant. Lem can study. The knight can inherit. Neither can make the absent people explain themselves completely. The 4 arcane eggs recoverable in Hallownest make a final small map of these unanswered connections. 3 remain in the abyss, where their presence is expected. The 4th comes from the seer after the knight gathers enough essence. This is not a random merchant stock or a royal treasure room. It is an ancient record preserved by the last living member of a tribe once devoted to the Radiance. The seer does not explain where her egg came from. It may have been collected during the Moth tribe's long history, recovered from ruins, inherited from an older keeper, or given to her through circumstances now lost. Possession alone does not prove alliance or conquest. Yet the object places evidence of the Void civilization inside the care of a dream tradition linked to Void's ancient enemy. One tempting theory imagines the egg as a trophy from a forgotten conflict between moths and Void worshippers. Another sees it as a captured archive studied by those who feared the darkness. A gentler possibility is scholarly preservation after the original owners vanished. The seer gives it freely as a reward for gathering essence, and she offers no hostile comment about its makers. None of these stories receives confirmation. Essence itself makes the exchange interesting. It is the light left by dreams, memories, and dead minds. The knight collects it through the dream nail and receives, at one stage of the seer's trust, an object whose deepest history belongs to darkness. Dreamlight leads to a Void archive. The 2 ancient powers are enemies, but the traveler can carry traces of both without immediately choosing one. The seer's own life is shaped by remembrance. Her tribe abandoned the Radiance, helping push their creator into near oblivion. The seer later carries guilt for that forgetting and teaches the knight to gather essence. An arcane egg is a fitting object for her to preserve because it resists oblivion through construction. The moth remembers through dream. The older civilization remembers through layered stone. If the egg contains an account of relations between their peoples, neither seer nor lem gives us access to it. One holds the artifact, the other can scrape only its outer history. The answer may pass through the knight's hands and remain unread. Hollow Knight is comfortable placing enormous revelations inside objects whose practical use is to be exchanged for currency. The egg near the Shade Cloak Shrine lies directly west of the place where the knight enters the ancient bowl. Its position ties record and ritual closely together. A visitor seeking the old power can find old knowledge nearby, although nothing indicates that the egg explains the shrine. The civilization may have stored instructions, theology, personal testimony, or a subject unrelated to Void. Calling every egg a religious text would narrow a library we cannot read. The birthplace egg rests inside a passage, later crowded by the Pale King's dead children. It could have occupied the site before the Vessel Project, meaning royal creation took place around an older archive. It could also have been moved during the king's research. Either way, an object made to carry civilization memory sits beside the memory the king tried to close away. That egg can be collected before the great reflective shell is dream-nailed. The knight may therefore hold an unread record from before Hallownest, while approaching a readable record of personal origin. One past is public, but inaccessible. The other is intimate and painful enough to transform the bearer. Knowledge changes life according to more than age. The history that belongs to the self can open where the history of a civilization remains sealed. The lifeblood chamber contains the most easily lost egg. Once the knight takes lifeblood core from its altar, the chamber expels the visitor and seals. If the egg was not gathered first, it remains unreachable. Nothing within the story calls attention to the missed archive. A powerful charm draws the eye, and ancient knowledge can be left behind because immediate strength seemed more important. That little choice echoes Hallownest's larger history. The Pale King entered the abyss for power and left its people unread. The Soul Sanctum gathered functional totems but not the wisdom that made them. A traveler can enter the blue chamber, claim new protection, and overlook the black egg beneath it. Usefulness repeatedly stands in front of understanding. The lifeblood setting also prevents a simple assumption that every egg belonged in a black shrine. Blue plants, dreamlike light, and the silent, many-eyed creature surround it. The chamber may have protected the archive from void, housed ancient study of lifeblood, or received the egg from a much later visitor. Its context opens questions rather than making the civilization monochrome. Together, the three abyss eggs occupy distinct relationships, one beside inherited shadow power, one beside royal memory, and one inside a sealed lifeblood dream. The fourth rests with the keeper of moth memory. If their placement is intentional, the ancient archive touched several forces that later histories treat separately. If placement resulted from later movement, the eggs still demonstrate how widely other cultures valued them. There are only 4 available to the knight, but Lem speaks as a member of a profession familiar with their rarity. This implies knowledge of other finds, reports, or collections beyond what remains in the fallen kingdom. His colleagues have theories about eggs choosing bearers. The ancient past has not vanished equally everywhere. Somewhere beyond the explored caverns, another relic seeker may hold a fragment Lem has never seen. The profession itself suggests a world after kingdoms. Relic seekers move among ruins, comparing objects across lands and arguing over interpretations. Hallownest is dead, but historical curiosity is alive outside it. The ancient civilization's survival may depend less on one perfect archive than on scattered people willing to carry questions from one fallen place to another. Soul Totems have an equally complicated afterlife because later powers imitate them. In the White Palace, specialized totems depict the Pale King and the Pure Vessel. They provide endless soul in places designed around punishing movement. These forms belong to royal architecture, not directly to the ancient civilization, but their function resembles the old reservoirs. The imitation may show that Hallownest eventually learned enough to reproduce part of the technology. It may also be a dream version of familiar objects shaped by the palace's memory. The White Palace is entered through dream, and its physical rules do not always map neatly onto ordinary construction. What matters is the visual claim. Royal figures replace the unknown ancient faces, while the old function continues. This is how appropriation often becomes invisible. First, a kingdom uses an older object. Then it remakes the object in its own image. Eventually, the public remembers the royal version as natural. The original totems remain in remote caverns, their strange faces disconnected from any name. The pure vessel totems in the path of pain sharpen that replacement. A child created through the ancient substance becomes the face on a reservoir of soul derived from ancient craft. Royal memory layers symbol over technology until origin and use can barely be separated. The palace praises the vessel, while the vessel's siblings remain below, among older relics. Yet the ancient forms endure outside the dream. They do not stop working because the king created newer images. They ask for no loyalty before releasing soul. The knight can draw from a totem, whether carrying the king's brand, void heart, or neither. Their usefulness crosses every identity the later story imposes. This neutrality may be practical rather than moral. A reservoir responds to impact, not worthiness. Still, it differs from doors keyed to brands, seals guarded by dreamers, and palaces reached through awakened tools. Ancient infrastructure is open in the simple sense that anyone able to strike it can receive what it stores. The arcane eggs are the opposite. Their knowledge remains radically closed. The civilization offered bodily power freely through public stone and protected information behind difficult inner layers. Perhaps soul was common provision, while records required trained stewardship. Perhaps the eggs contained knowledge too dangerous for an unprepared reader. Or perhaps their technology made a distinction between energy that should circulate and memory that should endure. That pattern gives the civilization a social shape without supplying invented institutions. It valued durable knowledge. It distributed soul widely. It marked a sacred relationship with void. It understood containers. These are practices, not a full constitution, but practices often reveal more about daily priorities than a king list would. The evidence is also shaped by what stone can survive. Songs, gestures, food, fabric, humor, and spoken names would disappear sooner than an egg or totem. The civilization now appears solemn because solemn objects endured. Its people may have laughed beside the reservoirs, decorated temporary homes, and told stories with no connection to darkness. Archaeology has filtered their lives until only the heaviest parts remain. Hallownest suffers the same filter in miniature. The ruins preserve armored guards more readily than soft-bodied citizens. Royal statues remain after private letters decay. If the kingdom were known only through king's idols, a later historian might imagine that every bug spent every hour worshipping the crown. The ancient civilization deserves the same caution. Its void prayers were important enough to carve, not necessarily numerous enough to describe every moment. Even the lack of graves may be a problem of recognition. A later traveler would not know which broken shell belonged to which age, unless an object or inscription remained nearby. The abyss is crowded with identifiable vessels because their forms repeat and their origin appears in memory. Older dead may have returned to soil, been taken by void, or rested in places later destroyed. Absence of a visible cemetery does not prove the culture rejected burial. What remains then is bias toward endurance and depth. That bias does not weaken the lore. It explains its tone. We meet these people through the things they trusted to outlive them, and those things speak slowly. One releases soul only when struck. Another gives up knowledge only when read layer by layer. Their history asks patience from anyone arriving late. Gathered together, the entire surviving lore of the ancient civilization still forms a narrow glimpse rather than a complete chronicle. They existed before Hallownest. Their presence reached across the land and perhaps far beyond it. They made layered stone archives and enduring reservoirs of soul. They worshipped void without naming a lord, asked it to remove fear and desire, and understood that its power changed through unity. Then they disappeared, leaving later ages to inherit tools whose makers they could no longer thank, and a darkness whose oldest meaning they could never fully recover. What followed was reuse. The Soul Sanctum gathered their totems. The Pale King lit their sea, studied its tendrils, shaped its darkness into servants, and used the abyss to make vessels. His abandoned child returned, entered the old shrines, remembered the royal crime, and brought scattered void under one will. The ancient enemy of darkness was consumed. In another dream, darkness itself rose as a god. None of this tells us whether the first worshippers were saved, destroyed, transformed, or slowly forgotten. The story keeps that door closed. It lets their prayer survive, without pretending that a prayer is a report of what happened next. And perhaps that is the right kind of ending for them. Hallownest is full of rulers who insist on defining eternity. The older people leave an egg no later scholar can fully read. Their history does not march toward a clean answer. It rests within layers, protected from certainty. The descent can grow quiet now. The king's brand has already opened the gate, and there is no need to carry it any farther. The lighthouse shines across the Black Sea. Tendrils settle beneath the beam. Old soul totems hold their pale glow in distant caverns, waiting for travelers who may never know who carved them. Somewhere in Lem's tower, rain moves softly against the stone, while an arcane egg sits among the relics. He may still be working at the outer layer, cleaning one careful line, stopping whenever the tool threatens to press too deep. The record inside does not hurry him. It has already waited through the birth and death of a kingdom. Below the city, the prayers remain. They do not need to be repeated again tonight. Silence is already their voice, and the darkness has kept their form. The shells that once yearned for an embrace are beyond the reach of any final history, but their work is not entirely gone. A well of soul brightens, a black egg holds, a small wanderer crosses the sea wearing shadow. There is nothing left to decipher before sleep. The deeper layers can stay closed. No ancient war needs to be invented, no vanished ruler needs a name, and no final citizen needs to tell us how the last day felt. The fragments are enough to rest beside, without forcing them into completeness. Let Hallownest remain above, its rain falling through the caverns, and its pale monuments fading gently into distance. Let the abyss remain below, still beneath the lighthouse, neither enemy nor answer for this quiet hour. Between them lies all the history we have followed: devotion, knowledge, misuse, memory, and the slow return of a child to the place where two civilizations met. The black egg can close around its hidden words. Lem can put down his tools. The old totems can dim one by one, not emptied, only resting until they are needed again. Nothing beneath the floor is asking you to keep watch. For now, the ancient voices are safe inside the stone. The sea is calm, the gate is open, but no one has to descend. Let the last pale light soften along the shore. Let the deep world hold its own mysteries, and let your thoughts grow still without needing to disappear. Rest now. Hallownest will keep the silence. Good night, and sleep well.